Vietnam War, a historical account, a detailed examination of a conflict that spanned from the 1950s to 1975. The war claimed approximately 58,220 American lives, 250,000 South Vietnamese soldiers, 1.1 million North Vietnamese, Viet Cong fighters, and up to 2 million civilians. It was a Cold War proxy conflict rooted in colonialism ideology and global power struggles. This series will cover the war chronologically, using declassified documents, military records. Following World War II, Vietnam, a French colony since the 1880s, became a battleground for independence. In 1945, Ho Chi Minh, leader of the Communist Viet Minh, declared independence in Hanoi, citing the United States Declaration of Independence. France, supported by $2.6 billion in United States aid by 1954, sought to reassert control, leading to the First Indochina War 1946 to 1954. The Viet Minh, trained in guerrilla tactics, received Soviet and Chinese support. The decisive battle occurred at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. French forces, numbering 10,000, fortified a valley to lure the Viet Minh. General Vo Nguyen Giap mobilized 50,000 troops and artillery, transported through jungles. From March to May, the Viet Minh besieged the French, who surrendered on May 7th, losing 13,000 and captured 2,000. The Geneva Accords of July 1950 for divided Vietnam at the 17th parallel the Democratic Republic of Vietnam North under Ho Chi Minh, and the Republic of Vietnam South under Ngo Dinh Diem. Elections to unify the country were scheduled for 1956 but never held. By 1959, North Vietnam authorized insurgency in the south, using the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos. Casualties in this period were approximately 20,000 French and 100,000 Viet Minh. Ngo Dinh Diem's government in South Vietnam faced immediate challenges. A Catholic leader in a Buddhist majority nation, alienated many through favoritism and repression. In 1957, the National Liberation Front, or Viet Cong, emerged, a communist-led insurgency supported by North Vietnam. By 1963, they controlled significant rural areas. The United States increased support, sending 700 military advisors under Eisenhower and 16,000 under Kennedy by 1963. Programs like the Strategic Hamlet Initiative, relocating villagers to isolate the Viet Cong, often backfired, fueling resentment. In 1963, Buddhist protests escalated, marked by Monk Thic Quang's self-immolation in Saigon, which drew global attention. On November 1, 1963, a United States-backed coup overthrew Diem, who was killed. Political instability followed, with 5 coups by 1965. Kennedy's assassination 3 weeks later left President Lyndon B. Johnson to manage the crisis. By 1963, 78 United States advisors and 2,000 ARVN soldiers died annually, with Viet Cong strength at 50,000. On August 2, 1964, the USS Maddox engaged North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. A reported second attack on August 4 was unconfirmed but prompted President Johnson to seek congressional approval. The Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, passed August 7, authorized military action without a formal war declaration. Operation Pierre Sarro bombed North Vietnamese targets in retaliation. By March 1965, 3,500 United States Marines landed at Da Nang, marking the start of combat operations. Troop numbers reached 125,000 by July. Operation Rolling Thunder, a bombing campaign, dropped 600,000 tons of bombs on North Vietnam from 1965 to 1968, targeting infrastructure but failing to halt Hanoi's efforts, supported by Soviet and Chinese aid. In the south, search and destroy missions and napalm strikes intensified. The Viet Cong maintained control over 40% of rural areas. By 1965, 1,369 United States troops and 7,000 ARVN soldiers died. Anti-war protests began with teach-ins at United States universities. By 1966, United States troop levels reached 385,000. The strategy shifted to attrition, aiming to outkill the enemy. Operations like Attleboro involved 40,000 troops, killing 1,100 Viet Cong but failing to secure territory. The Phoenix program targeted Viet Cong infrastructure, eliminating 26,000 operatives by 1971 but drawing criticism for human rights abuses. In 1967, battles like Hamburger Hill saw empty to United States deaths or a briefly held position. The Khe Sanh Siege began in January 1968, with 6,000 Marines facing 20,000 North Vietnamese. B-52 strikes dropped 100,000 tons of bombs. In the United States, the draft fueled unrest, with 500,000 inducted by 1967. Martin Luther King Jr. criticized the war in April 1967. Over 100,000 protested at the Pentagon in October. Casualties included 9,300 United States deaths in 1966 to 1967 and an estimated 100,000 Viet Cong and North Viet North. A My Lai massacre occurred in March 1968 but remained secret. On January 30th, 1968, during the Tet holiday, 85,000 Viet Cong and North Vietnamese launched coordinated attacks on 100 South Vietnamese cities, including Saigon's United States Embassy and Hue. The United and ARVN repelled the offensive, killing 45,000 enemy fighters. But the psychological impact was profound. Media coverage, including the execution of a Viet Cong suspect in Saigon, eroded United States public support. Walter Cronkite's February 1968 broadcast called the war a stalemate. President Johnson's approval fell to 36%. United States Army study Proven warned of strategic failure but was ignored. The My Lai massacre, killing 500 civilians, occurred in March but surfaced in 1969. Johnson halted most bombing in March 1968, pursued peace talks, and announced he would not seek re-election. United States deaths in 1960 totaled 16,899. Anti-war protests intensified, with university occupations like Columbia's. In 1969, President Richard Nixon introduced Vietnamization, training South Vietnamese forces to replace United States troops, reducing numbers to 475,000 secretly. He authorized Operation Menu, bombing Cambodia with 110,000 tons of explosives to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, destabilizing Cambodia and empowering the Khmer Rouge. In April 1970, 30,000 United States and ARVN groups invaded Cambodia, prompting North Vietnamese retaliation. The 1971 Lam Son 719 operation in Laos failed. In the United States, the May 1970 Kent State shootings, killing 4 students, and the Pentagon Papers leak in June 1971, exposed government deception. The My Lai trial convicted Lieutenant William Calley, later pardoned. United States deaths totaled 11,780 from 1969 to 1970. Anti-war promise speech with 250,000 Washington, D.C. in 1969, though Nixon claimed support from a silent majority. By 1972, North Vietnam launched the Easter Offensive, deploying 14 divisions and tanks across the South. And Loc and Quang Tri saw heavy fighting, with United States air support dropping 120,000 tons of bombs. ARVN held key positions. Nixon's 1970 to China visit eased Cold War tensions, pressuring Hanoi. In December 1972, Operation Linebacker bombed Hanoi, killing 1,600 civilians and forcing peace talks. The Paris Peace Accords, signed January 27, 1973, mandated United States withdrawal within 60 days and released POWs. However, 150,000 North Vietnamese troops remained in the South. United States deaths from 1971 to 1973 totaled 6,000. By 1974, Watergate forced Nixon's resignation. President Ford faced a Congressman willing to fund South Vietnam. In January 1975, North Vietnam's spring offensive captured Phu Quoc. United States didn't respond. Huyen Dong and fell by March, with 100,000 refugees fleeing some hanged on helicopters. On April 30, 1975, North Vietnamese tanks entered Saigon's presidential palace, ending the war. Operation Frequent Wind evacuated 7,000 civilians by helicopter. Over 130,000 Vietnamese fled as boat people, with thousands dying at sea. Total casualties included 58,220. United States troops 250,000 ARVN, 1.1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, and 2 million civilians. The war's legacy included Cambodia's Khmer Rouge genocide, Agent Orange health issues, and PTSD among veterans, which the United States public trust and government declined. Vietnam unified under communism and later became a United States partner.